We are experiencing load growth all over the region, and in these rural communities in particular that haven't seen it before, they're trying to figure out how to adjust. There's no way, if you have load growth for 10 and 20 years and no addition of resources, that you can reliably meet their needs. It's important just for everybody to remember that the ultimate long duration energy storage battery that we are so fortunate to have is our wonderful hydro system here in the Pacific Northwest. Nothing beats that.
Welcome back to DAM, the official podcast of Northwest Hydropower. I'm your host, Austin Rohr, and I manage all things communications here at Northwest River Partners. If you've been listening for any length of time, you know that we love hydropower, but we recognize it is not the end-all be-all for solving our energy needs. We have a diverse mix of resources that help meet the demands of our grid, with hydropower as the backbone, and we strive for a cleaner energy future while facing growing demand. We're going to need to bolster these resources and build out a whole new slate of infrastructure in order to meet those goals. Doing so is far easier said than done, but one of our very own members, Ravalli Electric, teamed up with the Pacific Northwest Generating Cooperative, or PNGC, to pull off something very special. And here to tell us the story of how that came to be and what's in store for the future is PNGC's Senior Vice President, Erin Erben. Erin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Austin. My pleasure. Thanks for having us. We're excited to share our great news with everybody in the region.
Absolutely. And it really is exciting news, and so excited for our listeners to get to hear about this as well. When I first saw the press release come out a few weeks ago, immediately it was like all these light bulbs going off in my head, and I really felt strongly that this was an incredibly important story to tell, and one that we're really excited to be able to share.
Appreciate your interest.
So something we really love to do at the beginning of these podcasts is actually spend some time just kind of getting to know the organization and the person who we're speaking to, and make sure that our listeners have that background and that context for our conversation. And so I'd love to just kick things off by having you tell me a little bit more about who and what PNGC is and what the purpose of your organization is in public power for our region.
Glad to. So PNGC stands for the Pacific Northwest Generating Cooperative, and we're a G&T, so a generation and transmission cooperative that serves 18 members, all cooperatives here in the Pacific Northwest. All are Bonneville customers, and most all of them are quite remote. Rural communities that tend to be a bit on the smaller side. So they don't really have resources available to follow all the issues in the region and participate. And frankly, they're just too small alone to be able to even envision investing in resources that could augment Bonneville going into the future. And so they team together in a group of like-minded, similar business model entities that work together to have a bigger voice and help each other, which is very much the cooperative way across the country. And we are excited to be of a scale where we're actually looking at building resources for our members to meet their above high watermark power needs into the future.
It really is fantastic. And, obviously, speaking as a fellow organization that is trying to give a voice to a lot of the same members, we certainly understand the value of that mission. I'm also very curious, in terms of what your actual role is as senior vice president, kind of take me through like what's the experience there, what's kind of the day to day, and maybe we can also jump a little bit into kind of your public power background as well.
You bet. Well, as an organization with 16 employees, a little bit of a jack of all trades. But technically, my role is to be responsible for power supply for our 18 members. And so largely that entails right now working with the region to help shape the Bonneville contract for the post-2028 period. And in addition to that, we are looking at resources. So we've done an IRP and put out an RFP, and we are currently working with a number of developers to consider investing in physical resources to help augment the growing need in the region. In addition to that, of course, right now we have this unique grant opportunity in the federal funding availability. And so our board has directed us to take every opportunity we can to apply for grants to help offset the cost of adding clean power to our portfolio for the region. So we're a little busy these days. My personal background in public power, I started in the field in 1996. So I'm starting to get a little dated, but also rich in experience. I came to the Pacific Northwest, I believe it was in 2010 or thereabouts. And so, gosh, it's been really wonderful. It's a unique place to work, as you know. Having worked in other areas, the region is so collaborative and tied together. It's nice to have that network. It probably takes a good 10 years to feel like you really have built that network. I remember going to PPC meetings and not knowing anyone. And now I go to PPC meetings and I feel like I've got a lot of good friends and colleagues there to support us and me and the issues that we all face together. So that's a little about me. I've spent the last, 15 years focusing on power supply, contract, load forecasting type issues. And I just really appreciate everything that the Pacific Northwest has to offer to our industry.
It really is a unique and fantastic place to be in terms of being in energy here. And to your point, both from a personal and also, broader scale, we have such great collaboration and such a great network of folks who are all working towards the same vision and goals. And, it's something that obviously, again, on that personal note, we're able to benefit from, but it's also something that you definitely see bleeding over into the communities that are being served by all of us, and that the different utilities that are out there are really able to provide something unique that you don't see in really any other part of the country, at least to the same scale that we have here.
Agreed, completely.
So along those lines too, kind of talking about how we are where we are today, and sort of the talking point or the sticking point, the reason we're having this conversation, how did things get started with Ravalli Electric to get the ball rolling on this particular grant for the battery storage project?
Thanks for that question. Well, we before we even really got a strong board directive, we were wanting to take advantage of these opportunities for our members and for the region and all the communities that we serve, because that it really is our ultimate mission. And this grant opportunity came along for rural and remote communities. And we knew that we had a number of members that had specific reliability, resiliency concerns. A lot of them, frankly, focused around wildfire risk or big severe weather outage risks. And so the batteries got our attention for that reason. We were wondering, how can we improve resiliency in those areas? So we went through all of our members, talked to them, and got some case studies of where reinforcement to the grid could really provide significant value to the communities for reliability, but also, frankly, for workforce development, because with the exception of one member being the San Juan Islands, none of our members have much experience, and theirs is only recent, with battery technology. So given how important that's going to be going forward in our industry, we thought it was very valuable for the employees at our own cooperatives to start to understand that technology and know how to use it. So for those reasons, we ended up with about, I think, 5 different opportunities, which we submitted to the Department of Energy, and they were in different states. And this is the one that the Department of Energy picked. And we think that's probably because maybe there weren't as many applications from the state of Montana. And so they, of course, want to try to spread around the benefits a bit. But we were really excited to get this opportunity, and we're working hard actually with the engineering team at Ravalli Electric and the Department of Energy to work through all of the process required to give it a go and get started on actually building the project.
And it sounds like there's a lot of collaboration taking place. You mentioned obviously getting out, trying to secure the funding, and then also trying to help with the actual planning and implementation of this. But yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more just in terms of kind of PNGC's role and purpose, and specifically, which part of this is um, the responsibility of the cooperative, in this case Ravalli, to seek this funding versus, how much of that is coming from PNGC, and whether or not it's a 50-50 split, or whether it's kind of like, hey, Ravalli, we went out and secured this, and we have this opportunity for you. Would you like it, type of thing, or like, how does that all kind of break down?
Sure, that's a great question. We don't do anything without the buy-in of our member co-ops. We work solely for them. So it was definitely a partnership from the beginning. We found members that were interested and had good opportunities, and we moved forward on all those fronts. In the case of Ravalli Electric, the battery technically would be owned by PNGC, but Ravalli Electric owns PNGC. So indirectly, it's still theirs, and it will be operated for the benefit of their community, and they will define the dispatch protocols. So it's very much joint opportunity, joint arrangement, and we do whatever is in the best interest of our co-ops. And right now, they have us very much focused on securing their power future, because there's just so much unknown about how we're going to supply and deliver power to the region in the future. And in the case of Ravalli Electric, they happen to be a transfer customer, which means that they're not actually directly connected to Bonneville's transmission system. So there's even a little bit more risk associated with just delivery of resources. And that's why battery technology also looked appealing, because if that is a key component of their future, it could frankly augment the need to invest in transmission in the future. If we've got the ability to offset power additions and transmission additions in the region, batteries could be a very important part of the overall picture in maintaining the reliable, clean service that our communities have come to enjoy.
It's something that we don't talk about too in depth on this podcast typically, although there may be some need to do that at some point in the future. But you bring up a really great point there, which is if you could potentially do something like this, comparatively speaking, the challenge of updating and overhauling transmission infrastructure is a pretty big hurdle that's not easily accomplished.
Yes, and no matter who you talk to, right now there's a general understanding that we need transmission, and it's a minimum 10-year lead time to get anything built, probably more like 20. So we are experiencing load growth all over the region, and in these rural communities in particular that haven't seen it before, they're trying to figure out how to adjust. And there's no way, if you have load growth for 10 and 20 years and no addition of resources, that you can reliably meet their need. So this, I think, really do believe that local generation is a key to service for the future, robust service for the future. And, there just aren't a lot of resources that you can use these days that you can rely upon when they're needed. So batteries offer that. And in addition, they're a great partner to the renewable resources, because you can charge them when those resources are available and then use the power when you actually need it.
And thinking too about the communities that these cooperatives serve, I mean, I wish that our podcast listeners could see the background that you have right now, because you have this fantastic map up that shows the different cooperatives that are part of your organization and the areas that they're located in. And typically, we are talking about fairly rural communities, and even if the territory is large, the actual, communities within that service territory are small, rural, as you mentioned, places where these challenges are perhaps more complex than what you'd see in a more urban environment. And I suppose, it's probably something that neither of us are necessarily experts on, but I'd be curious just to get your take, having all these different members in your organization. A lot of that load growth seems to be correlated to a trend we saw throughout the pandemic and now in sort of a post-pandemic world, which is remote work allowing people to move to more rural communities. And so we see people sort of, spreading out further and moving out to these areas that typically were always, really small, really localized. And now you have folks kind of coming in from all different parts of the Northwest or even other parts of the country. And I'm imagining, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of what these utilities are experiencing with that sudden increase in load growth is at least attributed in part to that.
Absolutely. We serve a 7-state region, primarily the 4 main states in the Pacific Northwest, but we touch 7 states, and interestingly, 8 balancing authorities. So we see pretty much all scenarios, and our members on the East are almost unilaterally all experiencing significant load growth, and it has not abated. I know that a lot of employers have asked their people to return back to the office, and there's been less of a focus on remote work. But in a lot of these rural communities, people are just frankly retiring. They're wanting to leave the big cities and they're moving out to rural communities. And it puts a pressure on power supply, both in reliability, but also in cost. In addition to just the cost of living increases that come along with the inflow of that money into these rural communities. And it's creating financial pressures across the board for them economically. So any kind of win like this that can help manage power costs for these communities are incredibly important. And just to give you a little insight into this particular community in Ravalli Electric, where this battery will be sited, it's essentially tied to 2 small communities, both of approximately 800 people, and they rely solely on volunteer fire departments in an area that is incredibly prone to wildfires. So this battery could really make the difference between the local fire department and a very big emergency, having the power to be able to continue to fight those fires locally, and providing, some shelter where there's electricity to charge phones and do other things. It's an incredibly important and valuable backup plan for a community like this.
The Northwest is a very large region when we talk about just even those 4 states alone. And Montana is an enormous state, even on the map, but certainly when you actually look at the numbers, the total, square miles, relatively speaking, to some of our other states here. And I'd love to hear your take on just, what an extended outage looks like for Montanans, comparatively. I think it's safe to say it's a lot different than what we might experience here for, like me, currently sitting west of the Cascades, right? The extreme, the sort of extremeness and ruggedness of the environment's a lot different.
I think there are a couple aspects to that question. So one is certainly frequency and duration, and honestly, our folks here in these eastern in Montana and Idaho, they do a great job in terms of reliability. So I don't know that reliability overall is any less. think the frequency of outages is probably similar. When it becomes really dire in some of these areas because it just gets so cold. And if you don't have power, you really are facing the potential for loss of life. But that idea that a severe weather event is 3 days or more is kind of uniform across the Pacific Northwest. And in my experience, I've seen that I think a lot of the bigger damage actually comes because people that live in a cold climate, they're prepared for it, right? They expect it, and they have a lot of the mitigation plans and resources in place to deal with it. It's those ice storms or those big unexpected storms that hit right at that temperature change when the snow is very wet and heavy that seems to do a ton of damage. And that is, I would say, frankly, a little more prevalent over there west of the Cascades.
No, we definitely did have quite the blanket of ice this last January, so definitely I can't refute that. But yeah, to your point, I was talking with one of our members over just over in Idaho, and they mentioned during that same period, I think they had temperatures down to like -40 when you factored wind chill into it. So
And
um,
that's cold. So,
yes.
so that is actually one thing that we took into consideration with this battery project, because we were hoping to use some long duration energy storage technology, since we know that our most severe outages are multi-day. You know that a 4-hour duration battery isn't going to serve the needs of the people for that entire period. But frankly, the technology is just not quite there yet, and we opted to go with certainty. But I think in the future, that long duration energy storage is going to be a real key to getting some of these rural communities through events like that.
Definitely, and we really, I think we all are very hopeful that those technologies will develop at a hopefully a rapid pace so that we have access to them in the near future.
And I think maybe just to bring it full circle, you know, it's important just for everybody to remember that the ultimate battery, the ultimate long duration energy storage battery that we are so fortunate to have is our wonderful hydro system here in the Pacific Northwest. Nothing beats that.
I won't challenge that one bit either. Kind of going back to just some of the logistics of putting this project together. And I'm sure that we could spend an entire podcast just talking about the actual, nitty gritty details of this subject. But at a very high level, what does the process look like for putting in this kind of grant request on a large scale?
Well, I've come to learn that every grant application is different. And you don't actually know what the specific criteria are going to be until the DOE releases the details for that particular application. So it's a bit of a scramble. It's a good idea to have some good projects. You've got some basics. So the government, the federal government, is interested in supporting rural communities. They have carve-outs for that. They're interested in enhancing reliability and clean energy expansion, but they're also very interested in helping communities that are considered disadvantaged. And so there's a Justice 40 criteria that you can look at maps and you can overlay your service territory and find out what you qualify for. So we had done that work and had a sense for where the DOE would be more interested in some of our locations for those reasons. And this particular site does qualify as a Justice 40 site. The other thing that is very important, there are two other aspects. One is having a supply chain that's largely made in America, and also workforce development. Incredibly important part of it all is that you are enhancing the skills of the workforce to be successful in the future. And I didn't mention this, but one aspect of our particular grant application was also that nearby to the location is a youth corps for young people that maybe they're having a second chance and they're learning some skills. And so we've tied in an aspect where they can come and learn about the battery technology because they're learning trades. And so to get them fluent in some of the new technology and new opportunities that will be coming in future job markets was definitely an important part of this application.
That's incredible, and it's the first time I'm hearing of it, and I'm so excited that we can share that story with our listeners, and I think that that's going to be an incredible story to see develop for that community as well.
So I guess my point in sharing all that was that there's a lot you can do to prepare in advance to be ready for when those applications come out. And it's a process. I mean, you typically put in a pre-application, and then if you're invited to put in a full application, you go through an even more intense round of pulling in all the details and lining up your partners and technical specs and scope, schedule, budget. Everything like that needs to be put into the application, and then you wait. And sometimes you wait quite a long time to hear back because the DOE has just gotten overwhelmed with the number of responses for each of these applications. I think in this case, they said they awarded between 50 and 70, and I think they had almost 1,000 applications. So it was a very competitive process. And it seems that a lot of them have been that way. So you really need to find a way to tie into the priorities of the program and stand out, I think, to get attention. So we feel really fortunate and grateful that our application met all of those criteria. And then there's been a team of people we've been working with from the DOE that are just helping us through the process. And in many cases, they're kind of figuring out the process as they go as well. So it's a team effort for sure.
Along the same lines of being a team effort from sort of the other side of the playing field, you mentioned the involvement of DOE on this project and on funding these grants in general. In doing my research ahead of this podcast and trying to better understand the project and how it came together, one of the things that I was reading was that there were some legislative efforts that essentially created some of the pathways to funding projects of this nature and making these grants possible. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what those pathways and opportunities were, and just the enthusiasm for having them available to us now in 2024.
Gosh, you're really testing me now in my governmental 101. But so there are a number of branches of the federal government that have been tasked with chunks of grants to administer. And this particular one fell under the Office of Clean Energy Demonstration Projects, which is a new agency that I think rolls up to the DOE there. You know, the Department of Agriculture, interestingly enough, is another one that administers some of the grants. I do have to give credit. I think there have been several legislators, including some here in Montana, that have supported this all the way through. But I have to give a lot of credit to NRECA as well, because they did a lot of work in DC to make sure that the rural communities weren't left behind and that there was a piece that would be dedicated to meeting their needs. And that's their purpose, of course, historically. So that makes great sense, but they were incredibly successful. One of the challenges we have, interestingly enough, on the West Coast is that a lot of the criteria for a lot of these grants is to reduce carbon emissions. And when you're a relatively clean area, it's hard to make the case that investment is going to reduce carbon emissions. So we've had to be a little creative and think about, well, what are the things that we would be investing in the future were it not for these grant opportunities, and might they not be, as clean as they could be with the grant funding? So that's a challenge for the West, but it's one we're up to. And I'm sure there have been and will be several others that will have won very significant awards here as well.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that, and it's very, very exciting indeed. And something else, getting back to maybe some of the kind of government 101, in terms of the grant itself. I mean, again, talking about DOE kind of being the one who issues it, is that who actually funds the grant? I mean, where does where do the resources come from? Where does in this case, $4.9 million amount come out of?
Well, they come out of taxpayer dollars ultimately, but yeah, they flow through several agencies, mostly the DOE. I do think that if in fact the program is successful in creating some breakthroughs in both supply chain and just technological advancement of some emerging technologies, then there will be a lot of value on the other side for decades to come to everyone in terms of having more power options, because they are just so limited right now to meet our ever-growing power demand, right? But I think that there's also synergies. For example, cooperatives specifically are often have access to loans through an agency called RUS. And so there are programs geared towards loans that accompany lower interest rate loans that will accompany some of the grant awards. So it's a mix of leveraging funding that's already there, targeted towards areas that the government is trying to bolster, and just additional money being added to the industry. The industry does need investment and does need technological advancement, frankly, to make some resources viable in the future. And hoping really that things like long duration energy storage and small modular reactors and other clean resource options will be more quickly available to us at a lower price point in the future as a result. I feel like a salesperson for the DOE right now.
I mean, you're certainly doing a good job of it. So I think if an opportunity were ever to come up there, but no, seriously, I guess getting back to the dollars and everything, when it comes to making sure that this project is fully funded, does the $4.9 million coming out of this grant cover the full cost of the project? Or is there a need for either PNGC or Ravalli or someone else to seek additional funding to make sure this gets across the goal line?
So most of the grant opportunities require cost share component, and that cost share component varies. But it's our understanding that the DOE did quite a bit of research to figure out how they could engage some of these small rural communities to actually apply for and carry out some of these projects. They just don't have the resources or the extra capital to do it. And so the resounding response was that, look, we really need options without cost share in order to make these viable for our communities. In some cases, some of these small utilities have only 20 employees, so they're not going to have, and their communities can be in the thousands. So they just can't come up with millions of dollars to invest in new technology. So the alternative is they don't, and they're behind the curve relative to urban areas as the technology is deployed. And so that was the solution that was trying to be solved here. And this particular grant opportunity was 100% funded up to $5 million. So smaller projects, but the potential for 100% funding. So our budget estimates for everything for the first phase of the battery project, because you can only cover up to 5 years under the grant process, was 4.9 million. So we came in just under the cap, and we are hopeful and working right now to ensure that the project can actually be implemented under that budget. But I think just given supply chain issues and cost increases and inflation, and so many, and just competition for a lot of the it's an interesting dichotomy because we've wanted to spur investment to reduce costs, but at the same time, the grants have increased interest and investment in a lot of the infrastructure, which has driven up costs. So a lot of people that we've talked to that are implementing these grants have found that the costs do come in higher than budget. So we're sharpening our pencils right now, and we're hopeful that we'll meet that mark.
Well, that's great news to hear that hopefully we should be on track to do so. And certainly the challenges of supply chain and costs are not unique to this particular project. It's something that we're all feeling both in the Northwest with our utilities and also in a lot of other aspects of our lives as well.
Can't argue with that, Austin.
You know, I think you touched on a lot of these points already, and so maybe we can kind of just connect the dots on this particular question that I have. But in terms of the purpose of this battery storage project and what it's really ultimately going to do for Ravalli and their customers and the communities that they serve, as you mentioned, there's sort of a transmission component. There's obviously the benefit of being able to store energy and use it when you need it. And that ties into being able to use that energy during, outages and particular events where having access to energy may be otherwise challenging during that time. But I guess, again, going back to connecting the dots, ultimately, what does something like this do for the service territory of a utility like Ravalli?
Well, I think it primarily ensures that communities like this don't get left behind as these new technologies are rolled out across the industry, that they don't have to wait a decade or more to be able to invest in them and learn how to optimize their own grid and their own future to accommodate them, right? So they get the workforce aspect and the understanding and what's the potential is out there for doing things differently. And then the last piece, not at all the least important, is just the potential to reduce costs for the people of the community. So the intention for how to operate this battery is to offset peak power. So that will, frankly, just decrease the demand charge that Ravalli customers have to pay for the Bonneville power, and that's the economic aspect of it. Now, if Ravalli had to pay for the entire cost of this project, it wouldn't have penciled, and so that's why the investment wouldn't have been made without the grant. So that's an important aspect, and why in the future, when the costs of this infrastructure go down, more entities can invest in this type of technology based on the learnings of projects like this.
Something that, just clicked for me as you were saying that, and I think it's a fantastic story that is sort of woven into this project, is the fact that really in a lot of ways it sounds like this project and projects of this nature are following in sort of the legacy of hydropower and cooperatives and public power in the Northwest with regards to not leaving people behind and making sure that all of us have access to this incredibly important resource being energy, no matter what kind of community you're in the Northwest. And even, to the point you mentioned as well with the youth of, being able to create workforce opportunities as well around some of these things. And then likewise, the cost component as well, of being able to keep costs low. It's something that, is unique to our region, and we're certainly very, very proud of and very happy to have, to be able to offer people clean energy at a very low rate comparatively to the rest of the nation. So it's sort of amazing to see that the spirit of what led us to where we are today is continuing in the work that we're doing looking to the future?
100%. It's what drove me to be a part of public power in the first place, and what keeps me inspired to do the good work every day.
It's such a valuable work, and yeah, it's something that everybody that I bring on this podcast is so happy to participate in, and the reason I think a lot of us really love what we do as much as we do. Um, Looking at the rest of our region, though, you mentioned that this wasn't the only grant you put in, and in terms of the overall picture, you spoke to the fact that there were over 1,000 of these grants submitted overall, with only a handful actually being selected. When we look at just the Northwest alone, and I understand, by the way, you might not want to reveal anything too much, kind of like a spoiler type of thing, right? But could you speak a little bit to maybe some of the similar efforts that might be in the works for the Northwest elsewhere, and maybe the stuff that might be coming on the horizon here in the next few years?
Sure. I think there are all kinds of opportunities out there, and I think that many utilities, including our public power colleagues, are pursuing them and in getting grants awarded. I know that some of our members, excuse me, have gotten awards, and they're figuring out how to implement them. And they're across the board. They're anything from battery technologies to cost offsets for investing in renewable technology, to hardening of the distribution grid, undergrounding. We just actually submitted another grant, I think it was last week, on smart grid. So it's a consortium of our members that have investments they need to make in smart grid infrastructure in order to be ready to be able to invest in things like virtual power plants, or have the control and communications technology available to leverage some of the emerging technologies. And absent these kinds of grants, those investments just wouldn't be made, and that urban-rural divide grows, right? So I think all of those are being pursued and won, and are going to be useful for those communities. The one that I wonder about, I have to say, and there are a lot of grants on the horizon for transmission projects, and I just don't know how many public power entities are going to be pursuing those. And I do see that potentially as a missed opportunity. I'm a part of the new West Tech effort in an advisory capacity to try to help figure out how we can regionally plan for new transmission. And I'm hopeful, it's a huge lift, but I'm hopeful that maybe some different entities together can figure out how to apply for one of these grants in the transmission space, and maybe help kickstart some of that investment that's sorely needed for our futures.
It is, there's a lot of things that are coming down the pipeline that are both, exciting and in some ways, concerning. And I think when it comes to the grid itself, we are seeing a huge increase in demand at the same time that there's a growing need for the build out of new renewables and storage projects, and also, infrastructure upgrades like our transmission. And at the same time, we also have the pressure of trying to keep up with clean energy mandates that are coming down the pipeline. I'd love to get just some of your perspective, broadly speaking, and really the PNGC perspective on the challenge that is ahead of us, and also, some of the risks that we're potentially facing as a result of those challenges.
Gosh, I'd say the challenges are manifold. And if you want a glass half full perspective, you can say the opportunities are manifold. We really have no end of potential challenges facing us. But I think that the creative, hardworking, dedicated spirits of the people that work in our industry are up for the challenge. They're excited to find solutions to these big, hairy problems, right, that face us, that have no clear answers. It's some of what I know keeps me engaged in the industry, when it seems like there are no solutions and so many challenges. But it's just going to take a continued dedication and collaboration to realize those. One of the things that I worry about, but I wonder if isn't true, is you hear a lot of people say that we're not going to get serious about the investments that are needed in our region until we have a really big outage, a really big blackout, as has happened in so many other parts of our country, that will inspire the need to really double down on the kind of investments that are needed to ensure our future. So I hope it does. That's not what is necessary to get us to understand what we have to do. But if it is, then I think that will be the big catalyst that will move everything forward.
And I appreciate that you do, despite that, have, a fairly positive outlook on some of these things as well. And, this project is obviously a very positive sign and a step in the right direction. And so, along those same lines, it sounds like there's some great opportunities that can be coming from this challenge as well.
Oh, yeah. I think figuring out, once you put so many minds of so many smart people, innovative people, and you inspire the next generation to come in with their new ideas, and, the national labs are engaged. A lot of people working on this right now. And I think things that we'll discover that will be the answers for society in the future probably aren't even very well defined yet. I think they will emerge over the next 10 and 20 years, and they will be the result of all the hard work that people are putting in today, kind of stumbling through the answers. Our 1 megawatt battery means a lot to this little community, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a drop in the bucket. So I think that technology breakthrough is what we're all looking for. And whether it's hydrogen, green hydrogen, or small modular nukes, or something else that we haven't thought of yet, is to be determined. But that's I think what keeps us all going. And it's going to be really interesting to see what happens over the coming decades, because it's definitely we're at a precipice, right? We can't keep doing things the way we have been for so many reasons. It's just not a path forward anymore. So we're making our path through the unknown right now.
Well, in keeping our eyes fixed on that path forward and looking at the horizon here, I'm also just curious, even with this project, right, you mentioned there's a kind of 5 and 10 year timeline and things like that, but where are we headed next? And really, I guess my question would be, where's PNGC headed next over these coming years?
So we are wholly committed to doing our part to help create reliable, affordable power for the future for the region. And that's, as we started this conversation, I said I've been heavily engaged in the conversation around the Bonneville contract. And we know that the federal hydro system it's just had so many pressures on it that Bonneville is finally saying, this is it. This is the amount that we can commit to providing into the future. And even that has risks, right? There are things that could happen that could reduce the output of the system. And so our members have the foresight to understand that it's time to start to put some of their own future into their own hands, which is, the spirit of cooperatives, local control, and having an important stake in your own future, which is what most big utilities do. But small utilities that have been served by Bonneville for so many decades, it's a paradigm shift. And so what we're doing is we're trying to figure out how we can support our member cooperatives and their communities and help add to the supply portfolio in the region. So our eyes are on bigger projects, investments in bigger projects, ideally dispatchable projects. They're hard to come by, non-carbon emitting dispatchable projects. And so that's the importance of batteries and all of this. It's a great bridge technology until we figure something else out. But that's our commitment, and our future grant applications will be centered around trying to reduce the entry costs of playing in that bigger space for our members.
Hey, are you there?
Hey, what'd I say? You left me.
I truly don't know what happened here, and we're gonna have to do a little bit of on the fly here right at the end. But our it looks like our Wi-Fi is down. I mean, it's like
Oh boy.
the network just disappeared from my computer even. So
Do you want me to try to record from my end?
I think that I've got it here just to finish us up, so we should be
Okay.
good to go. But yeah, just what an interesting thing. I've never had that happen on the
Well, we were
podcast
talking
before.
about reliability, right?
Yes, energy reliability. We'll have to see about internet reliability.
Honestly, communications anymore, it seems that it's pretty much on par.
For sure, for sure. Well, thanks for sticking around while I got things resolved on my end to get us back online and able to record again. And yeah, I know you were wrapping up there and just tying things together on reliability. I don't know if you had any kind of final points you wanted to hit with that one, but I figured try and pick up somewhere where we left off, right?
Yeah, I guess, if I have any sage words of wisdom, I think the big thing is that I've learned and come to accept over the years is that there are no silver bullets, but there are silver BBs. And so we just have to take every opportunity that we can get to put together to lower the risk and increase the set of opportunities that are available to public power in the Northwest. And do that by working together and just keep forging ahead. And you want to seize opportunities and take risks, but not the big ones that, can sink you. You got to be cautious and mindful as well, which is exactly why working together is so great. It's why PNGC exists. It's how public power has been successful, and it's just the way that we need to continue to operate even amidst a changing landscape, especially when it get a little contentious sometimes when there's scarcity or the perception of scarcity, for us not to stick together and work towards the same goal. But at the end of the day, we're all looking for the same thing, and we just need to remember that and continue to rely on each other. Together, I think we can get it done.
I couldn't agree with you more. I really couldn't. And I appreciate the perspective so much. I think, we as an organization and really, as a region, appreciate the hard work that you all put in and the work of our cooperatives that supply power to these communities across the Northwest. And I also really appreciate you taking the time and being a team player here as well. I know it's kind of a unusual situation we ran into, but just really appreciate being able to tell this story to our audience, to get to hear more about this, and also get to hear more about PNGC as well. And that really leads me to kind of one last final thing, which I always kind of put our guests a little bit on the spot just right at the end of the podcast. And so apologies in advance for having to do that right after having our little Zoom issue here. But we always kind of round the show out by actually getting back to our guests and kind of taking a step back from all the heavy, really information-rich conversation we've been having about our subject. And the way that I like to do that is just to kind of give our guests an opportunity to have the floor and use this platform to actually share a little bit about themselves and something that's important to them. And so the way of doing that is to just kind of ask you if you could provide us with some advice, right? And it could be career advice, it could be life advice, it could be just something you heard recently or experienced recently that stuck out with you, and just something that caught your attention and you'd like to share with other folks and spread that message. But Yeah, we're always looking for ways to get to know what makes you who you are, and what inspires you in your life and helps you be the person that you are in your career.
My goodness. So you finally threw me a tough one. Um, no, I appreciate the question. Thank you. Let's see. My own personal motivation is I think we're just kind of born being driven towards accomplishment or not, and you kind of just follow the path that you're given. We all have different gifts. So mine has always been to I just keep soldiering on, right? And just keep every day, get up and try to make your little piece of the world a better place. And sometimes you think that's through protecting what you have or checking the boxes off your list. And over the years, and I think probably even more so my years here in the Pacific Northwest, have really taught me the value of relationships and the fact that when we all work together, we can just accomplish so much more. And sometimes it takes a little longer, and sometimes it's frustrating, and you can't really see the end. I feel like you're not in control. But I'd say you just hang in there and rely on each other, and you find on the other end that life is much richer and you've accomplished so much more. So that may be a no-brainer to some people, but it's a life lesson that I've been reflecting on lately, and I just have to say, put it out there to share with all the other folks that are just doers like me who keep marching forward. That remember to look up once in a while, smell the roses, appreciate how far you've come and what you have and the people that are on the journey with you.
Well, so many times I think even if we've heard the same piece of advice over and over throughout our lives, we need a good reminder every now and then. And I really appreciate that. And we also, as an organization, we appreciate so much the collaboration that you and PNGC bring to our region, and the fact that not only are you all soldiering on and trying to make the world a better place in your own lives, but that collectively you're doing that for our region, and doing that for so many other people who benefit from all of the amazing work that you're putting in. So really, thank you so much for that. Thank you for the advice, and thanks for the amazing conversation today. It's just been incredible getting to share this story with our listeners, and so excited for folks to hear more about this project. And maybe they'll hopefully go dig into it a bit more and learn how they can not only benefit from this and their communities, but also get in touch with their utilities and maybe see about ways that they can get involved in projects elsewhere in our region.
Thanks, Austin. And I would be remiss if I didn't put in a final plug, just as a thank you for all the hard work that you do bringing us together at Northwest River Partners, and sharing messages like these for us to bring us all a little closer together. So keep doing the great work.
Thank you so much. And hope you have a really great Friday, and enjoy this sunshine that we're seeing out there.
You too. Take care.
Thanks to Erin not only for sharing the important story behind this battery storage project, but also for hanging in there during a very abnormal and unforeseen technical issue on the podcast. Luckily, the show rolled on, and we were able to close out on a high note. I also appreciate all of you who stuck through that and are still here listening at the end. We're all about keeping the lights on at Northwest River Partners, but apparently we need to do something about our internet. Well, I've still got you. Why don't you do me a huge favor and open up the listening platform you're on right now and hit that subscribe button to keep up with future episodes. You can also turn on notifications so you don't miss new uploads of DAM. But for folks that don't, just know we're here every other Friday. A 5-star review wouldn't hurt either. In fact, positive reviews are one of the biggest ways to support us, along, of course, with spreading the good water power word. Now, on the note of words, if you head to nwriverpartners.org and utilize our contact form, you can let us know what you think of the podcast and who or what you'd like to hear next. You can also share your comments, questions, and concerns there. And if that's too complicated, just write into us directly at info@nwriverpartners.org, and we'll be happy to respond. Lastly, be sure to follow us at NW River Partners on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Hopefully, this episode left you feeling energized about batteries, battery storage, and how we secure our funding for these projects. But as for myself, at the end of every podcast edit, it's time for a recharge. So until next time, see ya.